All right, before we move on to our next section, I want to just make sure we're all on the same page with adding and subtracting with negative numbers. So today is really just a 11.2 and an 11.3 review. I want to go over some examples and things explicitly about adding and subtracting negatives. So this will be a really good paper of notes to have in your notebook, because I'm really going to go over just some step-by-step examples. So let's start first. I'm going to actually split my page into this little half right here, because I want to focus on this side. We'll talk about adding, and you'll see why it's important to separate adding negatives with negative numbers, and over here we'll talk about subtracting. And so the first thing that we learned was adding with integers. Now, technically when you're adding, so you can have, it splits sort of into two different ways. There's basically examples where you'll have the same sign, so you'll add numbers with the same sign, and then often for the most part, we're really working on when you have a different sign. I mean, you guys have been working since kindergarten on adding numbers with the same sign with positive numbers, but in this case, if you ever have, let's say for example, I want to add -9, so let's do this, -9 plus a -3. These have the same sign, they're both negative. In that case, your only step is you add numbers together, and then you just keep the sign. Keep the sign. So here it's as simple as 9 plus 3. 9 plus 3 is 12. But I see that both the numbers here are negative, so my answer is really a -12. Well, what happens when I have a different sign? So here, and you guys should know if it's the same sign, 9 plus 3, it would just be in regular 12. But for the different sign, this is where we get some complications. So let's say, for example, I have 7 plus a -13. Well, here I'm adding two different numbers with a different sign. 7 is positive, 13 is negative. My first step here is I want to find the difference between both numbers. And when you find the difference between both numbers, you're thinking more of absolute value. So I'm thinking just 13 and 7. If I were to do 13 minus 7, I know that difference is 6. So I want to find that difference between both numbers. So that would be, in this case, 6, because 13 minus 7 is 6. You can also think the absolute value of 7 minus 13 would be 6. So then step 2, once I find the difference between 13 and 7, step 2 is to take the sign of the larger absolute value. And that's very important, because right now technically 7 is greater than -13, but I'm looking at the absolute values. Which one has a greater distance from 0? That would be 13. 13 is negative, so the difference was 13 minus 7 equaled 6, and then I make the sign, take the sign of the larger absolute value, so my answer has to be a -6, because 13 is a negative and 13 is greater than 7. So in this case, my answer would be a -6, and this one was -12. So let's go over some examples. So example 1, if I had 12 plus a -15, I know that in this case I can take what is the difference between 15 and 12. 15 minus 12 is 3, I think which one is greater? 15 is greater than 12, and 15 is negative, so my answer is a -3. So that's one way of thinking about this. I'll call it option A. But remember, you can also switch around the order. So a -15, as long as I keep the symbol in front, I can really think about this as 12 minus 15. And 12 minus 15 is still a -3. So those are kind of your two different ways. This is when they have a different sign, that's just one example, but you can also switch your order around. Let's try another one. Example 2. -6 plus 9. So once I take 9 minus 6, I think which one has a greater value? 9 is greater than 6. 9 is positive, so it's a +3, and that is my answer. Now, option B of solving this, again, I can take, this is a +9, this is a -6, and I can bring this over here and think of this as just 9 minus 6 is 3. So either way, you'll get the same answer. Now, if you have multiple steps, my recommendation is that you simply go left to right. So for example, this was out of your homework. If I have something like a -12 plus a -4 plus 9, well, I'm just going to go left to right. That's the easiest way. You can technically solve the -4 plus 9 first, but if you kind of mess around your order, don't worry about that yet. There's a couple of issues you'll run into that you haven't learned yet. So for now, just go left to right. So the first thing I'll do is I'll want to solve -12 plus -4. Well, they're both a negative, so my answer will be negative, and 12 plus 4 is 16. And then I bring down the rest of my problem. So now I just have a -16 plus 9. I can think about this as 9 minus 16, or I can think 16 minus 9. What is that difference? That difference will be 7. 16 is greater than 9. The sign of 16 is negative, so my answer is negative. And so my answer is a -7. One more example, example number 4. If I have -13 plus 7 plus a -3, let's go ahead and do -13 plus 7 first, and then we'll add on my -3 at the end. I'm going to try to, actually, never mind, we'll add that on the back. So -13 plus 7, this is the same as 7 minus 13, or I can say 13 minus 7. What is that difference? That difference is 6. 13 is greater than 7. 13 is negative, so that answer is going to be a -6. And then I bring down plus a -3. So I'm adding two negatives together. So 6 plus 3 is 9. I know my answer will be negative. And so my answer for number 4 is a -9. So all of this, your answer is -9. All right, so now let's go to subtracting. Now subtracting is where a lot of people started running into issues. And I want to be very clear, there's really only one step when you're subtracting with negative numbers. This is talking about when you're subtracting with negatives only. So same sign is going to be there. There's nothing different. This is your only step, is you need to remember stay, change, change. And I'll explain what this means. But this is huge. Whenever you subtract with negative numbers, and I'll be specific, it's really only with negative numbers you'll do this. It still works with subtracting positives, but so whenever you are subtracting with there's included a negative, you'll do stay, change, change. What does this mean? This means that you keep, the stay is you keep that number exactly the same. So I'll kind of go along with an example right here. So let's say I have 4 minus a -5. I stay, change, change. So I stay. I keep the first number the same. Change means you're going to basically turn subtraction into addition. So stay, change. This was originally, I'll show you this. So stay, this is now 4 plus, and then the last change, stay, change, is you change the number, so you change the sign, but you keep the number. Keep the same number. So basically, a negative will become positive, and if it's positive, you turn it into negative. So in this case, stay, change, so I change my -5 into a +5. So basically, this was my original problem, and I turned it into this, which is really 4 plus a +5, which is 4 plus 5. So these are the same equation. 4 minus a -5 is the same thing as 4 plus 5. So we do stay, change, because now I can think, oh, 4 plus 5, that equals 9. And so your answer is 9. So remember, and this is huge, this is so important. So I would star this. This is a key point here. Remember, if I have something like 4 minus a -5, this is the same thing as 4 plus 5, because remember, subtracting a negative is the same thing, equals the same thing as adding a positive. Subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive. And on the other hand, if I had something like 4 plus a -5, remember, adding a negative is the same thing as actually subtracting a positive. So this is the same thing as 4 minus a +5. So adding a negative, let me move this up. Adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive. So I would just let that sink in for a sec. We've kind of talked about that, but really just I want that to kind of marinate in your mind. And let's go over some examples. So example number 1, if I have something like -9 minus a -6, I know this is subtraction. I stay, change. So I stay, change, and then I change a -6 into a +6. So now it becomes an addition problem. And that's why we had to learn the rules of addition first, because essentially all you're doing with subtraction problems is that you're turning it into an addition problem. So -9 plus 6 is the same thing as 6 minus 9, which I know is -3. Or I could have thought about that as 9 minus 6 is 3, and then I take the sign of 9, which is negative. Let's try another example. Example 2, I have -31 minus 14. Whoa, I just threw my pen. I am subtracting numbers of 2 different signs. So in -31, I stay, and then I change. So now I just have, this is the same problem, it's just easier to solve. -31 plus a -14. My answer will be negative, and 31 plus 14 is 45, so my answer is 45. Example number 3, if I have 20 minus a -10, again, stay, I change, so this is the same thing as 20 plus 10, which is nice and easy as an answer of 30. And then a couple of ones that were on your problem. So for multiple steps, same thing. When I'm dealing with addition and subtraction only, I want to just work left to right. Because remember, even though PEMDAS, addition and subtraction have an order, addition and subtraction are inverses, so you always go left to right when working with them. Okay, so let's end on a couple of these. So this is a good one that was on your homework. If you have 0 minus a -4 minus 8, technically right now 0 is it doesn't have value, but it is sort of a placeholder for something. And again, if I have 0 and I want to take away a -4 from 0, taking away 4 negatives is the same thing as adding 4 positives. So really, I still do stay, change, change to get 0 plus 4. So 0 minus a negative 4 is 0 plus 4, which is 4. So I get 4 minus 8, and 4 minus 8 equals a negative 4. And I'm running out of room, so I'm just going to flip this to the back really quickly because I have 2 more examples I want you to try. So again, working with over here with subtraction. So example 5, if I were to have negative 14 minus 6 minus a negative 2, and then example 6 is a negative 11 minus a negative 8 minus a negative 3. Go ahead and pause this video and try them on your own. And if not, go ahead and you can unpause it or follow along with me. So this one I'm going to take care of negative 14 minus 6 first. So negative 14, I stay, change, change. So this becomes a negative 20 minus a negative 2. Stay, change, change. This is now negative 20 plus 2, which gives me a negative 18 as an answer. And then this one, I go left to right, take care of this first. Negative 11 minus a negative 8 is really stay, change, change. So this is 8 minus 11, or I can find the difference, which is 3. And then I take my negative value. So this equaled negative 3 minus a negative 3. And be careful, this sometimes people get mixed up when it's the same value, but I just do stay, change, change. Again, stay, change, change. So this is really negative 3 plus 3, and negative 3 plus 3 actually equals 0. So your answer here is 0. So in this case, I have negative 18, and here I have 0. All right, so hopefully that helped you guys. It's sort of a review for everything, and then we'll move on to a different section tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions.